Today I'm going to give you my first impressions on the brand new legendary tier French battleship Bourgogne, and I'll tell you right off the bat that my first impressions are as follows. This ship is phenomenal. It may be one of, if not the best battleship in the game. Certainly it's up there with République in terms of power. It is just absolutely sublime. I love it. I can't wait to unlock the Bureau project. Obviously, as a community contributor for World of Warships Legends, I have this ship on loan, courtesy of Wargaming, but I've already started the Bureau project, and I can't wait to finish it so I can have this ship as a permanent fixture in my port. It is just so good. Now, a brief rundown on the ship's stats. It's got 12 15-inch guns, which can reload in 24 seconds when you build for it. It goes at 32 knots base in the water and comes with the engine boost consumable. It's got 2 charges of the main battery reload booster, and its armor is pretty much non-existent. Like most French battleship armor, it's coated in 32mm plating, except on the turrets and along the waterline protecting the citadel. So it can get overmatched by the likes of Yamato and Musashi basically everywhere, and it's particularly vulnerable to HE spam. It also doesn't have a lot of hit points, only 74,700, which is quite a bit less than your typical legendary tier battleship. And you might think to yourself that on paper this sounds pretty underwhelming. In fact, I've heard a lot of people in my recent stream chat saying something along the lines of 15-inch guns at legendary tier seems pretty mediocre. Well, just ask this broadside Montana how mediocre these 15-inch guns are as he eats a salvo and takes 2 citadels and nearly 30,000 damage from these 15-inch guns. These are not your piddly little German 15-inch guns at tier 6. These are like the best 15-inch guns in the entire game. There's 12 of them. The dispersion can be trolly sometimes, but when you're throwing so much shit at the wall, most of it is going to stick most of the time. These guns, while they are slightly trolly and not pinpoint accurate, they are incredibly consistent, and they are very, very good at punishing broadsides, as you can see, and as this Montana found out the hard way. And of course, the main battery reload booster, if you get a broadside, you can use that thing, and you can reduce your reload to like 10 seconds for a short amount of time, allowing you to get 2, maybe 3 salvos into anybody who makes the mistake of giving you broadside. It's much like the Jean Bar in that way. In fact, if you want the TLDR on the Bourgogne, I would say this is the Jean Bar 2.0. It basically is the Jean Bar. It's got 2 quad turrets in the front. The upgrade is that it's got 1 quad turret in the rear, which makes it much easier to kite, and you will certainly need to do a lot of kiting in this ship, because this is not a brawling battleship that is going to excel at pushing in. The lack of armor precludes it from doing so. It's best played, I think, at medium to longer ranges, and you want to get in the habit of moving this ship around the map. This is not a ship you just want to take onto a flank, park in a place, reverse, and then bow tank the enemies. If you do that, you're probably going to get eaten alive by HE spam, torpedoes, penetrations from large battleship caliber guns. Again, this thing really doesn't have all that much armor. No, this is a ship that is probably going to scale in its usefulness based on your skill in a battleship. If you're really good at battleship positioning, if you know how to move your battleship around the map, and you know how to put yourself in places where you can get the broadsides of the enemies, then I think you're going to excel in this ship, and you're absolutely going to dominate all the other battleship competition. If not, if you're the kind of battleship player who doesn't make a habit of moving their battleship around the map and instead merely pushes into bow tank using only your front 2 guns and reversing under the hail of the enemy fire, with HE spam, AP spam, even torpedoes, well, I don't think you're going to be floating on the surface of the sea for too terribly long. This is a ship that probably requires a little bit more skill in battleship play to make the most of, and that probably does come down to the 15-inch guns. So, for some people, it may be a little bit of an issue, but I really don't think so. This ship is just too good. Meanwhile, this game, it's a little bit unusual. You can see most of my team is in the center, and there's a Shimakaze in this alpha cap. I don't really know what I was thinking coming back this way. My destroyer is taking the Bravo cap, which is great. I've asked him to take Alpha, and he's going to head there next, but there's no universe in which I want to push this ship into a Shimakaze. Again, the rather shallow hit points pool at 74,700. Well, that's not gonna provide me too much protection against Shima Torps, so I'm not going to push into them. I am going to sail away. The rest of the enemy team is on the other side of the map near Charlie. It's only the Shima and the Wooster over here, and you can see right now that the Wooster is starting to shoot at me. In fact, he's going to start lighting some fires, and he's going to do a fair bit of damage to me. Again, HE spam is a huge weakness of this ship. You need to avoid the HE spam by not sailing straight into it. You certainly don't need to park and sit still and allow the cruiser to spam you. You need to move your battleship because you will be eaten alive. You can see the Wooster has removed quite a bit of our hit points. He even switched to AP momentarily as we gave him broadside. But we are going to drop spot here. Our gearing is closing in on the Shimakaze, and he is probably going to be able to take out that Shima with the help of this dying GK, who is pushing straight into the HE spam and the Shima. Well, actually, to his credit, he's going to turn and try to use that island to provide himself cover, so that's not actually the worst move. That's actually pretty good. You love to see it. You love to see battleships not sailing in a straight line and using island cover to protect themselves from the HE spam. After all, if the HE spamming menaces can use islands, why not battleships? Meanwhile, this Xarkun first is making an ill-advised move. I've already blapped him once as he reversed from behind that island, and now he's doing it again. He gets a little bit lucky in that we only do like 11k with that salvo, but of course we have that reload booster, so we just use that, and we've got another salvo right on its way. This one is going to be just a little bit more effective. It takes away 16,000 of his hit points, and, well, he's well on his way back to port. But anyway, you've seen the power of this armor piercing against broadsides. I don't think there should be any doubt in your mind that this AP excels at punishing broadsides. This may be one of the best battleships in the entire game for punishing broadsides, actually. But what happens if you're facing a battleship that isn't giving you broadside, refuses to give you broadside? Maybe your average Musashi player, who simply takes their ship, points it at the enemy, and bow tanks, using only their front two guns to deal damage to their foes. Well, you're probably not going to damage such a Musashi with your AP. Instead, you'll want to switch to the HE. And the HE is phenomenal. Again, these are 12 guns. Now, their high explosive shells don't pack a huge alpha strike. I think it's only like 5,800, and the fire chance is in the high 30%. But again, 12 guns, so even the low numbers in terms of alpha and fire chance really don't matter. This HE is monstrously effective at chewing away the hit points of bow-tanking battleships like Musashi. It's true that with 15-inch guns, you really can't overmatch anything at the legendary tier, but HE does not care about armor angling, so simply switch to it if the angle of the enemy ship's armor becomes a problem for your AP. The HE will more than do the trick. And you can keep firing it over and over pretty quickly. This is actually a fairly good HE spamming battleship, although, indeed, to get the most out of it, you are going to have to use the AP against broadsides. But, as that Musashi found out, the HE is perfectly well suited for taking out bow-tanking battleships. Now, there is one more downside to this ship that I don't think I've mentioned. Obviously, the armor is not fantastic, but the other downside is that the turrets, much like the Jean Bart's turrets, are very squishy. I was playing a game last night where I was kiting away from, I think, a Yamato. I was about 14 kilometers away from him or so, and I had my stern pointed at him. Nevertheless, one of his salvos came up over my ship, fell down, hit my super firing turret on the front of the ship, like once on the top of the turret armor, and disabled it for the entire game, turning me into a Gascon, basically. That was not great. These turrets are weak, and the armor is basically non-existent. So this is not a ship you're going to want to play at close ranges. If you try it against especially more than one ship, well, you're not going to be floating for very long. This is not a brawler. It is much more a medium to long-range battleship. And it excels at the kiting battleship playstyle, which is something I employ very often because I think kiting in a battleship is just as useful as it is in any other class, and I think it actually has the effect of keeping you safer and making you more effective in the long run because it allows you to disengage. And of course, this ship is very fast. So we're just going to kite away from this Musashi and spam him with high explosive. We've done 140,000 damage so far, and we've got a fire burning on this Musashi. The HE is quite effective. You can see as it penetrates his bow, we can do salvos of 8, 9, maybe even 10k. The fact that people were hesitant on the idea that the Bourgogne has 15-inch guns because of the lack of overmatch capability, I honestly don't understand it. I think that the hand-wringing about that may be due to a misunderstanding of overmatch. Overmatch is not the be-all, end-all of battleship play. It is not the be-all, end-all of shell penetration. Overmatch is simply what happens when your shell is big enough to ignore a certain threshold of armor. Anytime you shoot an AP shell at an armored surface, so long as that surface isn't overmatchable by the AP shell, then a ricochet calculation is performed, and based on the angle, the shell may penetrate the armor or it may ricochet. But if the shell can overmatch the armor, it means it penetrates the armor without taking the angle into account. You, of course, can calculate the overmatch threshold by taking the shell in millimeters and dividing by 14.3. 15-inch guns on the Bourgogne can overmatch 25 millimeters of armor, and there's not a whole lot of that at the legendary tier. But overmatch doesn't mean you can't penetrate. The Bourgogne absolutely can penetrate the broadsides of any battleship at legendary tier. It can penetrate them for monstrous amount of damage. It can also blap cruisers and delete them from existence. It just can't overmatch anything. And that really, really isn't a problem, because if you need shells that you don't have to worry about their penetration based on the angle of your target, all you do is switch to the HE. It really is that simple. Now, we've racked up 176,000 damage done and the high caliber medal. There's only one single ship left alive. It's a Minotaur, so we're going to cut to the end of the battle where we take another shot at the Minotaur. I think we hit him one more time and we rack up about 190,000 damage done. And this is not a fluke, by the way. This is the second game I played in a row in the Bourgogne where I got nearly 200,000 damage. These guns are incredibly consistent. The ship performs very, very consistently indeed. It is fantastic. I would highly recommend it if you enjoy playing battleships. You can get it in the Bureau. Simply go in there and start the project today. Honestly, if you've got the Yamato in there, the GK, the Conqueror, and you're waiting to complete those, if it were me, I would pause those projects and start on this one and get this ship as soon as possible, because I really think it is one of the best ships, one of the best battleships at Legendary tier, if not the entire game. I've got another game that I want to show you in the Bourgogne. It is the most epic throw you've ever seen in your life, but the results from the guns in that game are good as well, so maybe I'll put that up later this week. But first impressions on the Bourgogne, fantastic. Let me know what you think about the ship in the comments. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I will see you next time. Goodbye.